Jenni Carlson.
I'm Barry Trammell. Welcome to the Jenni and Barry Show.
Oklahoma State starts spring football next week, signaling the start of the run-up to one of the most anticipated Cowboy football seasons in a long time. OSU returns almost all of its starters from a team that played for a Big 12 title, which has rightfully got Cowboys fans fired up. But before Ollie Gordon and company return to play in the fall, they've got a month plus of spring ball. What needs to be accomplished this spring? Who could benefit most from these practices? We will talk about all that and more. But first, we want you to subscribe to our show. Just hit that subscribe button. Might not seem like a big deal, but it will help us, and that helps you. So subscribe today. We also want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Barry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, 988, Oklahoma's Mental Health Lifeline, Two Fellas Movers, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. Well, Barry, spring football gets people excited. College football is back in the conscience. Players are back on the field. I think the OSU fans are pretty excited for this fall, but do you sense a buzz from Cowboy fans?
I do sense a buzz. I assume everybody connected with college football all across America has a buzz for this, what's really a landmark season. First year of the 12-team playoff, the first year of massive conference realignment, a 16-team Big 12, the 12-team playoff, the no Pac-12, just new everything, new opponents, new landscape. It's going to be a fascinating year, and Oklahoma State's right in the middle of it as one of the linchpins of the new look Big 12, coming back with returning 18 starters from a good team the year before. I mean, what's not to be excited about? So I do sense a buzz. It's almost like a new beginning. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating season, and Cowboys seem poised to do well.
Yeah, I would agree. And, obviously this 12-team playoff setup, we haven't seen it in action yet, so we don't exactly know how it's going to look, how it's going to, break down. We do know you win your conference, you're in. Cowboys played for a conference title a year ago. So I think the idea of really having a great opportunity to, get into that expanded playoff, maybe even host one of those first playoff games, Barry. I mean, like that to me, when you got a team that has a lot of known commodities and the known commodities are really good, I think that is reason to be fired up. And frankly, it's definitely a vastly different feel than where the Cowboy fans were a year ago. Remember, coming out of a disappointing end to the 2022 season, quarterback change, just a lot of unknowns. And frankly, this time last year, I think a lot of people were, they didn't know. And in a lot of ways, they were really dreading what the 2023 season might look like for the Cowboys. Then it gets off to a terrible start. And, I think woe is me was a wide refrain, and it should have been. But now feels completely different, to the point that, a year ago, we were talking about how unfortunate it was that Oklahoma State wasn't going to have a spring game because of ongoing stadium renovations. Just a chance to maybe get the faithful together and feel a little bit better about things. But now it feels like it's unfortunate because there's still ongoing stadium renovations. No spring game this year. A chance to, not have those fans together to really get even more excited about the fall. It feels like an opportunity lost not having a spring game this year.
Yeah, let's tell the naked truth about spring games. The anticipation is always better than the reality.
Absolutely.
By about the late second quarter of any spring game, everybody's bored, everybody's off. If you got a sensation, a new quarterback, like I can't remember for sure, but the year Spencer Sanders was clearly going to take over. Hey, let's go watch Spencer Sanders. That's not really the case this year. Alan Bowman's in his 29th year of playing college football. Everybody knows Alan Bowman. So Ollie Gordon is going to carry in full contact situations about 0 times this spring. So we're not really missing that much.
Right.
And
Right.
so the cool thing about a spring game is just getting up and putting on your school colors and going to campus and hanging out and maybe doing tailgating and just going into the stadium and seeing guys in shoulder pads. And the game itself is not terribly great. So I'm thinking OSU will do something. I'm not sure I don't think they formalized it, but they'll do something to celebrate. I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe have a meet the Cowboys day over at the Sherman Smith Center. Let people walk around and meet the players and do those kinds of things, and maybe have some drills. I don't know, some throw and catch stuff. But the hardcore fans and maybe even just some of the fringe fans can get a sense of the program. If it's a nice spring day, that would be very good and keep the juices bubbling. So just bringing people to campus is what I miss most if we don't have a spring game.
Yeah. And, I think there are ways that if OSU really wanted to have a spring game, they could pull it off. I mean, for crying out loud, Kansas is going to play its home games next year at Arrowhead Stadium. If they can get that figured out, surely OSU could figure out a different spot for a spring game if they so desired. But yeah, I think something that is a chance for fans to interact with players. I mean, frankly, that's probably one of the reasons people stay to the end of the spring game at OSU historically, is because they get to go on the field and meet players, get interviews, get pictures. That's probably the highlight of the day.
Hey, it's not a field rushing, but the field is full of fans after OSU spring game. Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. I mean, we're down there, Jacko. We have trouble finding players we want to talk to because there's hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 or so of fans. You can't find the players because of all the fans. So, yeah, I think if they can come up with something along those lines, some sort of social interaction, I think that'll be a good supplement. This is one of those springs, like we said, 18 starters. You know most of these guys. That's why everybody's excited. They got, in this portal era, in this NIL era, in this early entry NFL draft era, 18 starters is largely unheard of. So, there's a lot to get excited about OSU football, just not only from the success level, but from the familiarity situation. I mean, usually, the OSU offensive line, who are these guys? They got enough guys to, be at two deep. Now they got all these guys back, and you've seen them play and you know them. So lots of familiar faces in orange.
Okay, so no spring game. So if there was one, though, because we're so familiar with these guys, like you said, Alan Bowman, check. Ollie Gordon, check. Offensive line, check. Even your defensive stars are long-term Cowboys. Is there a player or even a position group, if there was actually going to be a spring game at OSU, somebody that fits you'd really like to see them in action in a spring game?
Oh, you always want to see the pitchers and the catchers, right? Because that's what we can sort of keep up with. I want to see all those defensive backs also. So many young defensive backs that OSU played last year that showed signs. They did all kinds of cool stuff. You think about, the Cameron Eppses and all the guys named Smith, Kale, Cam, and whoever I'm forgetting. But, those guys, it'd be fun to watch them with some of the young wide receivers, some of the veteran wide receivers. So that's something, the line play in a spring situation is it's often hard to monitor. It's hard to keep up. We're not trained with the football eyes of coaches. So that's what I would probably most regret seeing is Bowman and the quarterbacks too, Flores and Rangel and Alan Bowman throwing against some of those young DBs. That would probably be my most entertaining part of what's now not going to be a spring game.
Yeah. And, I think in a spring game situation, what you said earlier about Ollie Gordon, I mean, that guy's not going to take any contact. Frankly, if they had a spring game, I don't know how much we'd see, any of those stars. I mean, maybe.
What? Hey, Jacko, you know what?
Yeah.
If we had a spring game, you know what Ollie Gordon might be doing during the spring game?
He might be like the announcer on the field.
He might have a microphone and be telling, hey, look at that. He literally might be the on-field PA guy. for the spring game. That literally might happen.
Okay, now I'm really regretting them not having a spring game because that would be entertaining. I don't have any idea what he'd say or do, but that would be fun. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. There might be a possession where you've got Alan Bowman on the field throwing to Brennan Presley and, but to me, I don't think you would see a lot of those starters. So, I think that, something like, seeing the quarterbacks throw even in maybe a 7-on-7 situation to the wide receivers. Some of them we know, some of them are going to have to, we know Rashad Owens, we know Brennan Presley, but who's that next wave of guys that are going to come in and catch the ball? Maybe getting a chance to see some of the reserve running backs. Obviously that's a spot where they lost some depth behind Ollie Gordon. So who are some of those guys? But then, like a Justin Wright, who was a transfer a year ago at linebacker. He gets hurt. He gets ultimately Nick Martin steps into the void, and holy cow, aren't the Cowboys grateful for that development? But seeing Justin Wright back out there, something like that, getting a chance to see some of those guys that we didn't get to see much last year, that would be interesting. But frankly, most of the work, I mean, that's how it is anyway in Springberry, is happening behind the scenes. And as we've talked with so many familiar faces, what's that going to look like in your mind? I mean, if you're Mike Gundy trying to figure out how you're going to structure spring, how is spring football going to be affected when you do have so many returning starters?
Well, I mean, in some ways it gives you the luxury when you have that much veteran, guys experienced, guys you can count on, guys how they're going to perform. You can give a little more extra to the guys down the roster.
Yeah.
If this was a year ago, Gundy and staff, they had to find ball players. Now the good chunk of their ball players already are found. So they can do some of the things that coaches like to do, build, try to develop for the future, those kinds of things. So I think you'll see more Cowboys be held out of the heavy contact. OSU doesn't do a ton of that. Gundy's fairly advanced in his way of thinking. He doesn't do a ton of hitting. He doesn't try to win games in July. So I think you'll see more young people involved. That makes for a potentially better spring practice in terms of the distant future. Yeah. So keeping your good players healthy and getting your young players better, I think, will be the two main missions of OSU football spring 24.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt anything that you've got a spring with so many experienced guys, and it'll just be the second spring with Brian Nardo's defense. So having a chance to, get even more acclimated, those veterans get more acclimated, get more comfortable, get those younger guys even more comfortable with the scheme and the system. To me, that could be super beneficial. We saw some good signs, some good evolution within the season last year. But having a spring where you can get, more guys out there seeing live action, even if it is maybe a second string offense that you're seeing mostly. I mean, to me, that's going to be really beneficial as well. And, clearly, you mentioned earlier, Barry, all those offensive linemen, which offensive line, there's been years when OSU has had a spring game. Because of its lack of offensive linemen, it hasn't actually been able to play a game. Now they've got so many that what do you think as far as practice goes when you do have, who your starting offensive line is and you've got a second wave? How is that going to change what Oklahoma State does? What will spring practice be like with a full complement of offensive linemen, something the Cowboys really haven't had for a couple of years?
Well, this is very rudimentary, but you literally can just get a lot more done.
Yeah.
Because in past springs, they've been, Gundy and staff, they've been limited by just the number of reps they can do because they didn't even have two full offensive lines. They had 8, 9, sometimes 11. But if you got 3 full offensive lines, you can get a lot more done in practice. Zip, 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 zip. You can multiply your repetitions. So when you've got enough guys to go, then that can really help. If you don't have enough offensive linemen, you got to go through reps slower. It expands practice. It becomes sort of a time mess. So, having extra players, having enough players 3 deep really expedites the amount of work you get done. And that's a new thing for OSU because of I can't remember all the years, but, several of the last 5-6 years, they've been so shorthanded that it's not really been been as productive of a spring as it could be. I think that changes this year.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's a whole different situation. There's been a few years I think Oklahoma State knew maybe in the spring and definitely in the fall what they wanted their offensive line to be, and then injuries beset them as the season got started. So I think there's probably been some springs where you might have had something kind of similar to this, but I don't remember it being this set, this kind of depth at the offensive line in a very long time, maybe even back into the early teens, mid-teens of the 2000s. It seems like along those times when you had the Whedons and those guys, the offensive line felt a little more certain, but that's been a long time since those teams rolled through. So this is a whole different setup for the Cowboys, for Mike Gundy, for his offensive staff. So, as we've talked about all these veterans, you mentioned the young guys, Barry, that are going to probably get a little bit more run in spring ball. Is it those young guys who benefit most? Are there some other people that you could see benefiting from spring football at OSU?
Oh, I think everybody can benefit. One thing about this OSU football team is it is an old team. You go down to the depth chart. I mean, I won't bore you with the names, but just looking at the offense. Here's the starters: redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt senior. You get to Ollie Gordon. It's possible the Cowboys start 10 seniors on offense.
Wow!
So this is a team that is old, experienced, and well seasoned. So those guys, they don't need the reps as much. Now, clearly they need to practice. They need to develop still, all that. Yes. But not like the 20-year-olds, not like the second-year guys. Yep. So I think that's going to be the focus of this spring practice. And, for lack of better, the Zane Flores class, the Rangel crowd, those are the guys that need these extra reps. I mean, Gundy's got to worry about 25 as well as 24. Now, your roster changes because of transfers. All those things, we know all about that. But, I think you're going to see a ton. You go over to the defense. I'm looking at the defense. It's redshirt senior, redshirt sophomore, senior, redshirt junior, redshirt senior.
Yeah.
This is a senior-laden team. So all those spring practice is not going to be about gelling. It's not going to be about, hey, get these guys together and let's make a rush for 24. The spring practice 2024 is more about the 2025 season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the talk is as the Cowboys get underway. I do rewind, though, to something that Casey Dunn, the offensive coordinator, said after the Alamo Bowl back in December. He said, listen, this was a team in 23 that they got to work. When things didn't look good, they got to work. They put their heads down and they worked their tails off to get better. And he said, we can't get away from that. We still have to be blue collar. We still have to work. So I think, yes, I do think a lot of young guys will get a lot of practice time during spring. But that Casey Dunn comment still rings in my mind that you want to make sure you don't feel like you've arrived. And that Cowboy team was good last year. And yes, they return a lot of players. And yes, those players are good, but they weren't undefeated. They weren't perfect. They lost games. They lost to Texas badly in that Big 12 title game. There's still work to be done. So balancing that is going to be interesting in the spring. How hard do you work for the 24 season? How much do you build for the 25, 26 beyond season? I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see as the Cowboys get underway with spring practice. That's all the time we've got this week, but remember to subscribe to our show. It really does help us. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. You can find our columns, videos, and podcasts at selloutcrowd.com, as well as barrytrammell.com and jenny-carlson.com. And if you want our content sent straight to your inbox, all you have to do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's free and it's easy. Just go to selloutcrowd.com and sign up today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.